This is High Vibe TV, the uncensored, guided, and community-based video TV network with content recorded and live streamed from the world-famous High Vibe TV studios. High Vibe TV delivers daily, weekly, and special programs focused on astrology, spirituality, history, community, and more. This is not your run-of-the-mill astrology and tarot. This is the future of spirituality, illuminating new ways the collective can step into the dawning of this exciting new dimension. The highest vibe is truth, and the truth always prevails. Download our awesome app on the Apple and Android stores so you don't miss our notifications, with special spiritual insights curated to the energy of the universe. Search for us on your TV with our exciting TV apps on Apple TV and Roku. Catch our vibe on your computer, where you can join in on the live chat with our amazing community and blog. Watch spirituality like you've never seen before. Download our apps or go to highvibe.tv. Subscribe now.
And also, to me, when I look back at that comet of 1811, it wasn't just that Saturn and Neptune were together. That was a time when Mars was with Saturn and Neptune. But that was when Saturn had already conjuncted Neptune. So I feel like over these next couple of years, these issues that seem to be very minor or at least confusing, but they're all going to have to come to a head. But it's kind of weird that they already are starting to. Back then, Pluto was already in Pisces. It was already in the middle of a transit. And that's a very long transit through Pisces, over 20 years. So this is different because we're about to see Pluto ingress into Aquarius in March. And we haven't seen that since, of course, the Revolutionary War had just started. So we have all these like interesting events happening that are all very similar and correlated in many different ways. It was also, the comet of 1811 came in the exact opposite point where Uranus is today during this comet. Uranus at 15 degrees of Scorpio, and if I take us to today, as the comet has just come in on the 12th, I'll move this a day prior, and we are seeing now Uranus right there, 15 degrees. It just went 14, 15, 58, but it's about to station direct in Taurus. So the exact opposition placement of Uranus. So everywhere I'm looking, I'm going, this is a kind of a wild moment and a wild time. And if I were to kind of mesmerize people with some astrology for a moment here in my life, because I like to do that, I will open up the Declaration of Independence chart. My chart, and we got the Declaration. There we are. So if we look at the Declaration of Independence chart, which is the beginning of America, Uranus is sitting here at 8 degrees of Gemini. So if we take a look at today, while this comet has come in, Mars has stationed direct within the last day on top of America's natal Uranus. Now, if we take a look at the comet of 1812, it was this Mars and Saturn that were in opposition to our natal Uranus, but actually exact Mars opposition. But look at this, Neptune exactly opposing the natal Uranus of America, and where Mars is now at. And the miscommunication about the blockade, and is this really a war? Is it what's really going on? If I think about what's happening now with what we just saw in the fall before the winter of 2022 was, oh my gosh, Poland just got bombed by Russia, and the intelligence community saying, oh yeah, no, it's Russia, it's Russia. And then they take a second and then really realize, no, it was actually Ukraine. And even Ukraine was saying it was Russia when it was really them. And if one thing would have got wrong there, it would have gone really bad. But now when you start to see that similar energy that came in on the Great Comet of 1811 that brought into 1812, and you see that you take the astrology of the comet of 2022, but is happening in January 12th of 2023, what you're getting is an exact weird moment here of Mars stationing direct on America's Uranus. So if I take us, I can actually take us to the exact moment here of Mars direct, which, wait there, boom. And in this Mars right there just went direct at 8 degrees on top of America's Uranus. And there's something about Uranus in Gemini that is either aspected or returning, whether it's the Revolutionary War, of course, for the declaration chart, Civil War, World War II, and then War of 1812, Neptune direct opposition with a comet, Mars and Saturn in opposition with Neptune.
You know what's also interesting and probably a topic for another day is when I've looked at 1560s, which is also when Pluto was in Pisces, I believe,
Yes.
right? That's when all of the religious civil wars broke out in France, religious warfare all over, religious warfare spills over into the into Florida. I've talked about this before. But I think also there was a Uranus-Neptune opposition. And there was an eclipse that happened right conjunct that, and I think it's flipped from where it is now.
So if you really want to get some, because you're bringing that up, if you look at in 1892, oh, why is this doing this to me right now? 1892, there we go. That Neptune and Uranus opposition. Oh no, you know what? It was Neptune and Pluto opposition. Neptune, Pluto. But there they are together at 7 degrees of Gemini. And this is where Mars just went direct, but also this is where it happened on America's. So there it is at 6, there it is at 7. And then if we go to, I think it was around 1654 when we were looking, and 1655. 1654. It was Neptune, Pluto, Uranus, Neptune. Yep, Neptune, Uranus together, but Neptune opposed Pluto. Yep. And so the Neptune, Pluto takes that long to come together in Gemini again, but now in opposition. That the Neptune, Pluto cycle is the longest one.
Now
and so we're still in it. Like, we still have not seen Neptune and Pluto come together since 1892. And it happened at 7 degrees of Gemini, right on America's Uranus. And that's when America goes into starting to build new communication, electricity, cars, all those things, and becomes the country of innovation, especially about communication. And we still did the internet, the computer, all things based off Gemini, right? Cars, transportation, airplanes, you name it.
Well, what do you think it is about that particular spot that where if things happen there, these kind of destined conflicts come about, or these changes that put everybody on a different path happen at those moments?
Well, I think because Gemini is such a fast, mutable sign, and it deals with, it's Mercury's home. It deals with very fast conclusions, facts coming out, minds changing, environments needing to go through metamorphosis. That's really what mutability is mutation. So it becomes very fast mutations. And they happen in very small places. It also was the innovator of, Gemini is the innovation of quick changes that deal with transportation or movement or words of mouth or communication. So you think of the 1650s and the printing presses starting to pump off. And so especially when you get into the religious civil wars, right? People are starting to read outside Latin and English and in German and in French. The first Encyclopedia Britannica comes out in the 1570s, and people are starting to know about what science is and what this is and what that is. So you start getting people going, I don't know about what the church has to say. So to me, it's that Gemini position that is the printing press. Here's a pamphlet. And it's pamphlets that I think change the world. Or a letter on a church by Martin Luther. So, which of course was earlier, but still not that far away, right? Just 3 decades prior. So that's where it's kind of interesting to see that now we're at the kind of commonplace, but we're even more so looking at it, that 1811 spot, because of that comet coming in the opposition to that point. And also, it is kind of one of those moments with Neptune coming back to where it was in opposition in the 1650s. But there is no Pluto there, right? It's like, oh, Pluto's in Pisces, and what is it doing? It's starting the square point. So that's also bringing up conditions of what countries were going through and stuff in the 1650s in a square point. So if you look at what was happening in Europe at the time, it was the beginning of countries and monarchs and religions and everything just starting to switch into new gears. This also was America being included in a blockade of international trade, while also having to face for the first time as its own independent country for not too long, not even 50 years worth, right? Its predecessors, and it's almost like the first moment that something could come about, it's like both sides maybe wanted to try at it.
Yeah.
And that's what's interesting about following planets is conjunction periods are the most important, because not only like in 1892, which we haven't seen the conjunction again, it's like, okay, and it happened on America's Uranus. Of course, that's why America is so rich and powerful, is because of its communication and automobiles. We control the internet, we created the internet, we created the computer, we created the car as far as manufacturing it, because Germany technically did with Mercedes-Benz, but they definitely had a problem mass producing it like Henry Ford. So you get that, but what you get is the square points and the opposition points. So in 1650, you have the opposition point of a Neptune and Pluto that was way prior to that, which goes back to the Da Vinci days, right? And even farther beyond that, the Dark Ages and so forth. So it's like, and them having to kind of do this opposition point. We're kind of lucky that we haven't really been having to deal with, the same situation at this time, but we are dealing with the separation of Neptune and Pluto and sextile, and as it's starting to close in. So it's one of those moments where I start to think of, it takes a long time for those two to come together. And it's all based upon a very odd orbit. So there's an oddity already. It's like the oddest of orbits coming together. And that's what a comet on top of things brings in, that X factor oddity. And if I think of Napoleon and looking at his chart and what his kind of energy brought to the table, he was an interesting one. His Rodden report is a C, so it doesn't mean that it necessarily is his exact time of birth, but there's been sayings that it was around this time. Now we know he was a Leo. He had Mars and Neptune conjunct, which is ironic because if you see Neptune here at 8 degrees of Virgo, that means at the time the comet came in was when he was having his Neptune square, exactly at 8 degrees of Sagittarius. So I could actually add the comet on top of this. So here's Neptune, squares Neptune. Now that comes when you get to around 40 years old, and it is a big spiritual test in your life. And he has Mars conjunct Neptune, which can lose control easy of your ego, or more importantly, your actions, and have subconscious issues with that. In Virgo, you'd think he actually was very good. I could control the ports. I can make this happen. He actually was very smart. He had Mercury in Leo too, so he was very extravagant, could speak what he needed to, but also looking at the fact that he was born with Jupiter in Scorpio in a square to his sun meant that he would push things too far to the limit and didn't understand the boundaries. He would push through the boundaries, and with Uranus being exactly conjunct when the comet came into his Jupiter, this would have exaggerated it. And just if I were to move that 2 years more into 18, 13, and 14 when he gets abolished, is when you see Uranus start to come on top of his Jupiter. They won't let me go here, but I can go back here, edit chart to 18, 13. So there's Uranus by 1813 already conjunct his Jupiter. Uranus moves really quick, much quicker through here. So if I go to 1812 and 1813, here we go. So we go backwards, 1812. There's Uranus conjunct his Jupiter right there in 1812. And right as the comet comes in, it goes on top of his Jupiter at the same time. So it's kind of like a really weird situation of the square to his sun at the same time too, that it was Uranus that actually fired the crazy shot with a Neptune square that was all part of the same comet's crazy energy, that if I were to use the Pope's astrologer from 1345 and use his algorithm of astrology, it would have been pretty easy to predict Napoleon's
downfall,
loss of control and pushing boundaries too far. Also, it's his destiny. He has North Node at 22 degrees of Sag. He was meant to push things too far, but in Jupiter and Scorpio, it is about expanding and understanding the boundaries and knowing when the limit is. And then that's the problem with the Sun in Leo. Oh, I can beat the limits. I can overcome them. And unfortunately for him, did not turn out too well. Also, he was in his Uranus opposition during the comet that came in, which is, of course, we call that the midlife crisis point.
What was happening to him in 1809?
In 1809, he would have been... All right, let's look here. Oh, North Node was on his... It would have been a huge rise for him in his life. He would have actually been feeling like he finally found his greatest power. With the North Node being in Scorpio, conjunct his Jupiter, South Node with his Uranus, and at that same token, that was with Jupiter in Pisces, making trines to his Venus and his Saturn. Pluto also in Pisces at 12 degrees, starting to oppose his Mars. That would have been a big peak of his strength, and being like, I can do anything, and I will be able to get away with it all.
So,
and Saturn and Neptune coming together, like we're about to see here in the beginning of 2023, starting in March. Ironically for him, in great aspects to his being a Leo, that would have been, this is great, I'm having a blast.
Well, so in 1809, he divorces Josephine, his wife. And it's because she was 40, she hadn't had a male child. It's like the Henry VIII problem. And he divorces her and marries a daughter of one of the Bourbon monarchs of Europe. So he finally was the Emperor of Austria. He married her daughter. And so was
she better looking?
No, she was very plain and very obedient.
Plain?
Josephine was the sexy one, but the problem was that Josephine and he had this troubled relationship where she married him when he was young. So he came in 1799 and managed to work
30.
his way into the government. And the revolution had happened. The reign of terror was happening in France. Things were out of control. He came in from Corsica. He was this little guy, 5'2", who was working his way through the military. He was sort of like this really romantic guy who could get wounded easily and would talk about how how love made him feel sort of lovesick and all of this. And he fell in love with Josephine, but he had like scraggly hair and he didn't have the best fashion. Josephine was used to Paris and high fashion and loved society and all of that. Her husband,
Anne Boleyn, no?
Her husband had been guillotined. And so she ended up marrying him because she was a widow, or I guess it's a widow, right? With a guillotine widow.
A guillotine widow. Widow. I keep thinking, now I'm thinking of Willow the movie.
But she had a few kids and never had kids with Napoleon. But she would cheat on him when he was off at war because she just thought of him as this little guy who was a nobody. And then he
had a little willow.
I don't know about that.
I don't know.
Possibly, I don't know.
I mean, they just did a study about guys with little willows who loved sport cars, and he loved to be on a horse and mounted up high on a horse.
That's true.
And she was French, and
so she was used to willows that were a little bit bigger than his Corsican one. I don't know. Honestly, I should look into that.
I think Mars
find out.
conjunct Neptune is definitely a little willow.
Keep that in mind.
Or he actually thought it was bigger than it was, too.
Okay.
But that's how he kind of put off his personality, too, right?
Yeah.
That's Neptune in Virgo, the like illusion of the reality of his might, his power, and his manlyhood and his man energy. But he had that Venus in Cancer, which would have made him the Leo love pup, right? Like puppy love, and then wounded very deeply. He also had Chiron in Pisces at 23 degrees that made an exact quincunx to his sun, and also at the same time squared his node. So he was Chiron square the node. So he always felt like God was betraying him.
This is High Vibe TV, the uncensored, guided, and community-based video TV network with content recorded and live streamed from the world-famous High Vibe TV studios. High Vibe TV delivers daily, weekly, and special programs focused on astrology, spirituality, history, community, and more. This is not your run-of-the-mill astrology and tarot. This is the future of spirituality, illuminating new ways the collective can step into the dawning of this exciting new dimension. The highest vibe is truth, and the truth always prevails. Download our awesome app on the Apple and Android stores so you don't miss our notifications with special spiritual insights curated to the energy of the universe. Search for us on your TV with our exciting TV apps on Apple TV and Roku. Catch our vibe on your computer where you can join in on the live chat with our amazing community and blog. Watch spirituality like you've never seen before. Download our apps or go to highvibe.tv. Subscribe now.